This video covers Chapter 10, which is all about data ethics. So in Chapter 10, we will cover institutional review boards, informed consent, confidentiality, clinical trials, behavioral and social science experiments. So, data ethics. The most complex issue of data ethics arises when we collect data from people. We have to do this in an ethical fashion. We have to do no harm. So here are some basic standards of data ethics that must be obeyed when gathering data from human subjects. And this doesn't matter whether it's an experiment. This also can count for observational studies, even when there's no treatment. So, all planned studies must be reviewed in advance by an institutional review board. You'll also see this referred to as IRB, right? You need to have an IRB. SLU, St. Louis University, where I work, has an institutional review board. So even if I wanted to survey students who were taking college algebra, I'd need to show them I have a really well-designed study and get it IRB approved. All individuals who are subjects in the study must give their informed consent. So part of the IRB application would be an informed consent form saying like what possible harm could come to them, and how long the study would take if it was observational. And all individuals and data must be kept confidential. Only statistic summaries for groups of subjects may be made public. So what we typically say is we also scrub the data. Scrub meaning clean the data so that no individual subjects are identifiable. When working with human subjects, many journals, so the places that publish these IRB reviewed studies, have a formal requirement of explicitly addressing human subject issues if the study is classified as human subject research. So an example from the Journal of American Medical Association says, for all manuscripts reporting data from studies involving human participants or animals, formal review and approval or formal review and waiver by an appropriate IRB board and ethics committee is required and should be described in your methods section. You have to discuss how you did this in an ethical way and how you got this approved in your method when you talk about your study. So the purpose of an institutional review board is not to decide whether a proposed study will produce value information or whether it's statistically sound. You do kind of want to lay that out for them, right? What it really is for, though, is to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects recruited to participate in these research activities. And the IRB reviews the plan of study and can require changes. So like you write an IRB and you submit it to them and then they give it back to you after some time. And most of the time they're going to suggest some changes. The most pressing issue concerning IRBs is whether their workload has become so large that their effectiveness in protecting subjects has declined. So like if I wanted to do a study for this fall, I'm recording this in June, it's already too late to get an IRB approved. Sometimes it can take like a year to get through this IRB approval process. So some have started to shorten the review procedures, especially for surveys, right? Because those are minimal risk. The impact is that it will take time. When an IRB is overloaded, there's temptation to put more proposals in the minimal risk category to speed up work, and that can be bad. That can lead to harm to participants. So, informed consent, both words in this phrase are important. So subjects must be informed in advance about the nature of a study and any risk of harm it may be, even if that harm is like, if it's a survey, this may take 15 minutes of your time. It may ask you some questions that you might not feel comfortable with. Say if we were surveying about mental health. Subjects must then consent in writing, like I agree, Dr. Miller, to be part of this study. Some researchers regard consent as a barrier to getting participants to create research. I think that's ridiculous, right? Because you need to explain all the possible risks. You need to make sure that there are other things being studied, especially in medical research, right? maybe too optimistic and try and convince patients to participate. On the other hand, it's like a both and situation. Really long consent forms that mention every possible risk can really be barriers, and most people don't read them, and others are frightened by the large number of possible but unlikely disasters and therefore refuse to participate. When it comes to confidentiality, it is important to protect our subjects' privacy. Privacy refers to a person's interest in controlling the access of others to him or herself, including information about themselves. One way this is done is by keeping all data about the individuals confidential. Confidentiality refers to the agreement between the investigator, so that's one conducting the study, and the participant about how the data will be managed and used, right? It has to be stored, a locked computer, right? Or locked drawer. Confidentiality is not the same as anonymity. Okay, which means that the subjects are anonymous. Their names are not unknown even to the director of the study, right? So I may know the names of my participants, but I won't tell anybody, right? Because we're keeping it confidential, but it's not the same as anonymity. So here's an example of a confidentiality example. This is from the Social Security website, right? It talks about how they use your information and gives you a nice introduction, more links, right? Lastly, clinical trials are experiments that study the effectiveness of medical treatments on actual patients, and they spotlight the ethical problems of experiments with human subjects, right? Randomized comparative experiments are by far the best way to see the true effect of new treatments, but some are taking a real medicine. Hi, Bobby. Hello, Kitty. And some are taking a placebo. Clinical trials can produce great benefits, but most of these benefits go to future patients, right? So we have to balance the future benefits against like present risks of those who are participating in this study. Both medical ethics and international human rights standards say that the interests of the subject must always prevail over the interests of science and society, right? Doctors take an oath to do no harm. When we move from medicine to the behavioral and social sciences, the direct risks to experimental subjects are less acute, but so are the possible benefits such as subjects. Ethical principles of the American Psychological Association require consent unless a study merely observes behavior in a quiet place, or in a public place. They allow deception only when it's necessary to the study, and they do not hide information that might influence the subjects willing to participate, and it's explained to subjects as soon as possible. So I hope we have a little bit of a better understanding about data ethics and, both sides of the coin. If you have any questions, please comment below.